What if a man from a long-forgotten familia had been put back into modern day in a new familia, one born of both dungeon and surface? What if this man, Cranel, was the fallen hero that would one day save us all? What if this was a familia myth? Sit back, relax, and enjoy. I would like to give a quick shout out to our members, all listed here, and if you yourself do want to become a member, consider clicking the join button or alternatively scrolling down to the link down below. Also, I would like to mention that we do currently have merch. Link will also be in the description, and without further ado, roll that intro. We see some time had passed since the entire Apollo situation, and we also see that the Hestia Familia had settled in more. We see they had continued in the dungeons, sticking to lower floors, at a max going up to about 20. I would like to remind you that a lot of people have higher levels, like Belle and, for example, Eyes. Yes, we do have some characters from canon missing from this Familia, but we don't worry about them too much, at least not for right now. Eyes and Belle would for the most part carry for the most dangerous monsters, while the rest of the Familia would take care of lower level monsters. And by the rest of the Familia, I obviously mean Wells and Lily. They had actually both really fast gained from level 2, Lily being lower and Wells being higher, to level 3 and 4. Yes, Wells had shot up to level 4. So, at the very least, they're able to keep up a lot more. Wells had gotten past the fact that he can now craft magical swords again, and would actually take it into dungeons just in case. On top of that, his armor smithing had went up to a whole nother level, and he had even started incorporating raw materials into the items he makes, like leather and much other things like monster pelt, which he could use for things like fire resistance, which does come in useful on the higher floors. He's even able to colorate them and customize armors and clothing like people want them. So he was able to make Eyes a new set of armor that didn't tear as easily as it did in canon. So much fan service. And even when it comes to Belle, he was able to make Belle some fire-resistant clothing, and that was about it. They would spend their times on the middle floors, so to say, and would actually all get along. Their teamwork would be pretty extravagant. And while time passes, I would like to remind you that Belle doesn't sleep, so what he would do at night is actually run errands with Lord Hermes. When an interesting fact popped up, Hermes had denied him coming with on a certain errand, and Belle decided to snoop around. I would like to remind you that Belle was an info broker on something similar to Hermes level. So what he'd quickly find out is that Hermes was transporting some items. These items were highly valuable. And what he also knows is that these items caused a clash between two gods. The gods being Ishtar and Freya. So there's something really curious happening. Even though Belle didn't mind Hermes, he knew Hermes wasn't to be fully trusted. He was a slippery one. And seeing that Asfei also hung back means that Hermes doesn't want anyone knowing about this. So Belle would decide to follow. But as he left their compound without Hermes by his side, some of his familia members would grow curious. And in this specific case, Wells, who was up making some more weapons. Wells would then sneak out and would eventually encounter a group of people from a different familia. being Chigusa and Mikoto. Mikoto in the original was a part of Hestia's Familia after the Apollo games, but there wasn't an earlier interaction between the Hestia Familia and Mikoto, so there was no reason for her transfer. And even though there was no reason for her transfer, they did actually still know the Hestia Familia, as we do come to find out that I don't know how to say this dude's name, Takamiku Zazushi, I don't know. His Familia had also fallen in under effect of the Apollo games, so they are at least acquainted with each other. When Wells would question where they're going, they would shrug it off. But now Wells is even more curious. Bell and these girls are all headed in the same direction. Up to his knowledge, they don't have any prior connections, so this is curious, to say the very least. He would follow along and eventually see the two girls snooping and asking questions. They were looking for a foxen kind. Very curious indeed. On the other hand, Bell had eventually caught up to Hermes and had actually said that he knows what's happening now. Hermes would gulp as Bell had got that information awfully quickly and would ask him to tell him what this information is. Obviously trying to root out a bluff if there was any. Bell would quickly tell Hermes what's going on, and this would cause Hermes some panic, but there's nothing he can do now. He would say that Bell could come with, is just he can't be faced with Ishtar. For reasons. Next thing we see is Bell waiting in Ishtar's red light district castle type of thing, as Hermes had went to her quarters, when Bell himself was faced with an all too familiar toad slimy face. This is Frayne, or Frayne. I'm gonna call it Frayne. So Frayne is a giant woman, to say the very least, and had prior altercation with Bell. She had known him since he had come into the city and had lusted for him. She had lusted for a powerful man that she had no chance of breaking. And Bell, it's little to say that Frayne isn't his type, so he'd go on the run with her on the chase. Frayne would eventually convince some other people to help her chase down Bell, obviously being other people in her familia like Elsha and the other two. But this would lead to nothing, as Bell himself would stumble into a room. When he does enter the room, a foxen kind girl would approach him saying about how she would be serving him today. And little to say, this was the red light district, so he knew what was going on. But moments after her approaching him, she would faint. He would try and wait for the girl to wake up, as this is still a safe place to hide regardless, as he would hear Frayne's goonies running around looking for him. When this girl eventually wakes up, she would have an altercation with Bell. This altercation would go most like canon, where he explains that she had passed out and she would swiftly apologize after he would explain that that wasn't what he was in here for. He was actually running from someone else. This was very interesting to her, but she would shrug it off. They would then start talking about the stories of old heroes. Not the ones of fiction, but the ones that slayed the dungeon bosses. The ones that had broken free and terrorized entire kingdoms. But unlike previously, Bell didn't only hear these stories, he was there to experience them. He would explain to her the extravagant experience of watching these heroes of legend fight. But he also had the horror experience of seeing them die. Obviously, he would not bring this up to her, but he would still talk about how all these people had heroic, great lives. People that he wished were still around today, solidifying a connection between the two. She would then start talking about a fallen hero she had heard resides in this city. Someone that might save her one day. As she looks up into the sky, saying a little too much, as Belle would realize that she's probably not here by her own fruition. She'd shrug it off, but Belle had already caught on to what was happening. He remembers the item Hermes was carrying, a death stone, and a foxen kind. They're planning on killing her. He would bring this up and she would just push back saying, yes, I'm sorry, Master Belle, but that's exactly what's happening, she would say, and he would stand up, putting out his hand, asking, well, do you want to be saved? She would light up in joy for a second before falling back to depression, saying that, no, it was only a mere way to say that I wish to be saved before my last moments, but everyone here has shown me kindness. They had made my life better than it was, so the least I could do is give up my life to make theirs better. Belle would clench his fist, wanting to say something, but would push it off as he would hear Mikoto and Wells talking outside. He'd say how he would leave, and all he'd be left is to encounter the two girls and Wells. When he questions it, they say they're looking for a foxen kind, with him only pointing to the window. Mikoto would jump up to the window, trying to bargain with Horihime, but it wouldn't do anything. She would wish to reside there, as Mikoto and her friend run back to her familia in sorrow. We now see that Belle is preparing for something. He had gathered his familia in the fray of night. He knows this ritual is about a week from now, so they need to prepare. On the other hand, Ishtar had heard what had happened from Horihime. Horihime, yes, was a slave, but for some reason she was loyal. More loyal than she should have been, and would let Ishtar know about Belle's entire situation. Ishtar, knowing exactly who Belle was, wouldn't be too thrilled about this. She would order her familia to go take care of it. And this time, it would be led by Frayne, since Belle is a level 7 and Frayne was assumed to be around level 5. With Horihime's level boosting abilities, this should come much easier. She should be able to clash with Belle. That's what they'd do. They'd wait for Belle's party to come to the dungeon, but it would never come to fruition, as that entire week Belle's party had been training outside of the dungeon, growing ever stronger. Wells himself had never went up to level 5, but Lily, to say the least, had caught up. Belle, on the other hand, could feel himself on the verge of becoming all so much more powerful. And while he was out at it, he had gotten a new skill point. Not exactly going up to level 8, but he had unlocked a skill called Life Control. He was able to take the life force from any being, including himself, and using it to summon construct-like weapons. He would see this come very useful. Eyes, on the other hand, had successfully leveled up to 7. Obviously, this is where things get a lot harder. The skill Quick Learn was effective, and it's only been a few weeks and she'd been able to level from level 6 to level 7 herself, making her and Belle the only level 7s in Auraria. But on top of that, this is where it gets complicated. They don't really have many monsters in the lower floors of the dungeon that could help them level up past this point. But they can't go further down the dungeon because of their teammates. So for now, they'd have to stick to level 7. And that's when they do it. The night of the ritual had come, as Belle had known how the ritual worked. It was a night of a full moon. The night the raid would take place on Ishtar's castle. This would go more or less to canon, with them divulging into groups. Mikoto and the rest of Lord Tsuchi's and yes, that's what I'm going to be calling him, Tsuchi's familia would also be there. They would have all cooperated and decided they'd go as a party. Them being indebted to the Hestia familia is obviously a reason, but obviously all of them being friends with Horihime would want to stop this themselves. They would go, and most would go to Canon, with obviously Mikoto being the one to actually find Horihime and alerting Belle and Lady Eyes. They would head up, and this is where things would change. Frayne would obviously tell Horihime to use her level up magic / sorcery on her, and that's what she'd do. She'd apologize as she knows that this could be bad for Lady Eyes and Belle. Eyes would instruct Belle to move on and go get the girl, but Freya would jump in front, saying that they don't stand a chance. The Sword Princess looks at Frayne with a stare like no other. She would exclaim that she had once been able to keep up with her, but now she is far behind, even without level up sorcery. Eyes would charge, with Frayne barely being able to keep up. Belle would obviously make it past, as only 2 people at this point would remain most likely. Obviously being the other 2 of Ishtar's familia that actually mattered in any capacity, being Aisha and whatever the blonde girl's name was. They would obviously not really hold a cone to Belle, as he would simply blitz them and move on. Horihime would beg him to leave, as Belle would get more and more frustrated. He'd scream out to her as other people that were fighting, specifically Mikoto, would be found, being healed, making sure that she's not basically dead, similar to Canon. But this time it wouldn't be by the guy from Freya's familia. It would actually be the people from Lord whatever the hell Mikoto's familia dude name is. Sorry, I really can't say that dude's name. So, when it comes down to Freya, she had still decided to raid Ishtar. What a better time to get rid of competition than right now. She had obviously heard from Hermes, because Hermes is weak-willed, and with a little bit of lust thrown in there, he would spill any information. So, she would still end up killing Ishtar. This time, it just wouldn't have anything to do with Belle. This time, it would actually have to do with Horihime. We'd find out that Freya had actually been after Horihime herself, but after Ishtar found out about Horihime, would grab her out from under Freya. Freya would push this off, as she would find that the same soul stone that she was after, or death stone she was after, was then taken by Ishtar as well. Now she knows that Ishtar was targeting her. A war was about to approach. And then, when Belle had raided it, that's when she found out that this was the perfect moment to wipe out Ishtar once and for all. Back to Belle. Belle had gotten frustrated with Horihime constantly begging him to just leave because he might get hurt. He'd scream out, "I was that fallen hero. The fallen hero you had questioned. The one you had wanted to save you, that's me. But I'm not here to save you. I'm here to tell you that you need to save yourself." His eyes would glow dark as he would rip out something that seems like life force, glowing bright red. As it would warp into a sword, he would slash backwards. Frayne had jumped up and tried to attack him, but obviously he had sensed her presence moments beforehand. He'd look back to see Eyes was pretty tired, and this rank up magic was pretty useful. But all Belle would do now was cut the change holding Horihime and walk away, saying, "Sometimes you can't have a hero. Sometimes you have to be your own hero. Now go ahead, little fox. Save yourself." Horihime's entire expression would change as she would get up and start walking. But this isn't for anything. Aisha wouldn't even bother stopping her. But others, a part of their familia, would at least attempt to. For example, Frayne. Frayne was injured from not only the fight with Belle, but also the fight in common with the Sword Princess, who was way out of her league at this point. It also didn't help that Aisha would team with Horihime. She would help Horihime out of this horrible situation and get revenge on Frayne, as she would give her that final push off of the floating gardens, as we don't see Frayne again. When it comes down to it, Ishtar's Familia had basically been wiped out. All their statuses released when Ishtar herself had died. So Aisha and her friends were all left to do what they wanted. Horihime, instead of joining Belle's party for exactly what he said, she has to be her own hero. So she would join her former friends and someone she had known. Lord Takumi Kazushi. I think that's how you say it, but yeah. That's the party she would end up joining, meaning Danmachi Season 3 is going to be a lot different. Not exactly having all the interactions between Horihime and Belle. But we do have Eyes on board, and the weird relationship, romantical relationship we got going between Belle and Hestia. Obviously wouldn't talk about that too much right now. But yeah, that's basically going to spell it for the end for the entire first 2 seasons of Danmachi. There won't be another part to this until next October. I really do hope y'all enjoyed this. It was really fun making this series, and I look forward to continuing it in the future. But if you're seeing this, tomorrow we are releasing a new series in What If Belle Joined Roth's Familia, and it would have a similar build and structure to this. We're going to be going over the first 2 seasons and then pushing it off until season 4 appropriately starts. That's where we would finish it off, obviously to make sure we don't go over any manga spoilers. I would also like to say that these videos are edited by our lovely editor Steak, and I would like to thank the Dragon Lord for creating our intros and outros. Talking about that beautiful outro, roll that baby.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.